Welcome to my channel. They laughed when she said she could make a Falcon 92 vanish. Hours later, 15 enemy jets disappeared from radar, without a single shot fired. This is the untold story of Phantom 8, the pilot who turned silence, discipline, and respect into the deadliest kind of stealth. Once you hear it, you'll never think about flying or survival the same way again. They laughed the moment I opened my mouth. You think you can make a Falcon 92 disappear? The room echoed with mockery. Captain Harris smirked from his chair in the front row. Maybe in a fairy tale, cadet. I didn't answer. I just closed my notebook, 6 lines neatly drawn in pen, and pressed it flat like sealing a vow. That night, as we neared the northern edge of the drift zone, 15 hostile radar pings lit our screens. Red, aggressive, alarming. The formation's chatter grew panicked. We were 200 meters from the exclusion line when I flicked the comms to silent profile. Eyes on your scopes, I said calmly. 3 seconds later, every radar contact vanished. Not jammed, not blocked, gone. You could have heard a pin drop through the oxygen masks. Back at Black Rock Air Base, dry mountain winds stirred jet fumes under a burnt-orange dawn. Overhead, loudspeakers droned routine briefings nobody listened to. I walked into the mission room alone, hair tied back, notebook tucked under my arm. No one looked at me, but a few younger pilots whispered. That's her, one muttered. The one who stares at clouds. Pilot of Ghostbird 4, another added. The girl with weather maps and 0 kills. I took my usual seat. Last row, second from the right. Left hand on my notebook's edge like always. The route projected on the wall showed escort duty for 2 recon drones over contested terrain, low-altitude flight weaving along disputed boundaries. The escort squad, for Falcon 92s. The major running the briefing chuckled when he reached my name. And I see we've even got a 4th seat filler, he said. Welcome aboard, Lieutenant Rivera. A couple of pilots snorted. Guess the 4th bird flies itself. I ignored them. Opened my notebook. Scribbled 6 notes. Low wind bands, 8 to 12 knots. Ground inversion at 7,400 feet. Interference layer southeast. Maritime reflection corridor. 3-second blind zones. Ridge shadow, eastern shelf. They saw a pilot. I saw a canvas. Later that day, in the hangar, Old Tech Sergeant Rubin handed me a strip of cloth tape marked with a faded insignia, an eagle's skull split by static lines. Keep it, he said under his breath. Most don't even remember what it means. I nodded. Didn't ask questions. In the mess, 2 pilots at the next table joked. Rivera thinks she can make a Falcon stealth. Tomorrow she'll say she can teleport on a skateboard. I only smiled faintly and spun the keychain clipped to my belt. A single number etched on its side. S8. The only thing I ever fidgeted with. Later, while the others ran pre-flight drills on autopilot, I spent the evening with thermal scans, echo maps, and maritime interference charts. I calculated where cloud cover met terrain folds and electromagnetic anomalies. While they studied tactics, I studied physics. Not to show off. To survive. My room at Black Rock was sparse. No decorations, no distractions. But the bookshelf was telling. Journals on atmospheric masking, electromagnetic propagation, signal distortion in multiband terrain. At the mirror's edge, a photo, one most wouldn't notice. 5 pilots, none smiling. Modified Falcon models behind us, paint schemes absent of insignias. I was in the center. No one at this base knew that version of me. At least, not yet. They thought they knew what stealth meant. To them, it was a coding, an angle, a signal jammer. To me, stealth was a question of presence. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the jagged spine of the Seraphim Range, we lined up for takeoff. Ghostbird flight, call signs 1 through 4. I was 4. The extra. We launched in pairs. Ghostbird 1 led the rise into the flatter bands of air, a crescent moon overhead sharp as a broken coin. The drones lit their position markers. We circled them in a loose arrow formation. 90 kilometers out, command reported low interference. Ghostbird 3 shifted bands, trying to compensate. Rolling static from the sea, someone muttered on the line. This early, I knew better. It wasn't early. It was predicted. Right on time. At 120 kilometers, the first threats lit up. Red sparks on the display. Then more. A cluster. 15 blips sweeping in from different vectors, converging fast. Multiple hostiles. Confirm 15. Repeat. 1-5. Ghost Bird 1 barked. We were outnumbered. Drone slow exposed. Our formation not built for defense. The scramble began. Orders flying, voices overlapping. Conflicting vectors. Confusion. They panicked. I didn't. I dropped altitude. Number 4, what are you doing? The lead snapped. I didn't answer. I flipped 3 switches in rhythm, dimming my instrument lights, cutting unnecessary systems, rerouting power away from emission-heavy modules. I dove under the cloud layer, into a slice of terrain I'd marked 12 hours ago. Then I keyed the calm and cold. Switching to silent profile, I said, eyes on your screens. And just like that, I vanished, from radar, from thermal, from their minds. They thought I was gone, but I hadn't disappeared. I had merged. 15 hunters advanced on ghosts. Their vectors twisted, lost guidance. Radar clutter increased. One enemy broke off, chasing maritime noise. Another dove into false thermal drift. Their formation unraveled. And in that unraveling, I drew a map. Ghost Bird 2, drop altitude. Hug the eastern shadow line. Ghost Bird 3, drift right. Hold position. On my count, turn 30 degrees. Drones, steady, no sudden shifts. I didn't issue commands. I gave them a rhythm. And somehow, they followed it. From beneath the clouds, my world became a sculpture of noise and silence. I traced under the enemy flight path. No lights, only instinct. I didn't fly by GPS. I flew by memory, by the shape of echo and terrain folds, by what the radar couldn't see. Up high, long-range support finally got a clean line. 2 quick bursts of missiles bloomed like orange petals, then disappeared. 15 contacts erased. Not exploded, erased. Over the comms, someone whispered, "Where the hell did they go?" Ghost Bird 1's voice cracked with disbelief. "What did you just do, Rivera?" I brought my bird up to formation altitude. Steady breath. Eyes forward. "We're clear," I said. "Get the cargo through. Head home." No one argued. The border lay ahead like a silver thread stitched across black cloth. As we crossed, the drones oblivious to their near erasure, I sat quiet. To them, it would go down as another mission. Routine escort. Minimal contact. To the rest of us, it was the night we saw 15 enemies scatter in fear, without a single shot fired by our wing. And it wasn't magic. It was something else. Discipline. Silence. Respect for the invisible lines of the sky. I'd just reminded them all, stealth isn't a feature. It's a mindset. Back at Black Rock, no one said much. The debrief room sat dim, just the side lights on. Ghost Bird 1, Major Kelso, set his helmet down with both hands. He didn't speak for a while. Just stared at me across the room like I was a puzzle he'd thought had only 4 pieces. "I figured you were bluffing," he finally said. I shrugged. "A Falcon 92 isn't stealth," I replied. "But a pilot can be." Questions followed. What systems had I shut off? What band had I used? What terrain had I followed? I answered none of them. "Not the kind of thing you write down," I said. "It's not a trick. It's a discipline." Most shook their heads in disbelief. One person didn't, Sergeant Rubin. The old tech nodded slowly, hands in his pockets. He'd seen this before. After the room cleared, he walked over and quietly handed me another strip of that worn black cloth. The symbol barely visible. "You still carry the mark," he said. I tucked it away in my flight suit. They didn't know, but he did. About the old program. The one buried deep beneath classified layers and whispers. Ghost Halo. That was the name. They had tried to train pilots not just to fight, but to disappear. Not with gadgets or chrome-coated jets. With instinct. Environmental mastery. Psychological suppression. To know when the sky would cover you, and when it wouldn't. Most failed. Only 8 ever passed. I was the last. They called me Phantom 8. In the last days of Ghost Halo, I flew 9 missions. 9 successful stealth routes across combat zones without a single hostile lock-on. We didn't jam, we didn't fight, we vanished. On the 10th mission, I lost my wingman. We were too deep, the terrain too volatile. He didn't make it out. After that, I asked for transfer. Routine duty. No more stealth. No more tactics that required losing a piece of yourself to keep others alive. At Black Rock, I kept quiet. Followed the rules. Hid my skill. Until that night. The next morning, the base felt different. Quieter. People still walked the halls, ran drills, ran their mouths, but the tone shifted. I noticed it in the way the younger pilots watched me, not with curiosity, but with a kind of reverence they couldn't put into words. One even stopped me outside Hangar 3. "Ma'am, could you teach us?" I blinked. "Teach you what? What you did up there? Not to be legends. Just to stay alive. To not make the same mistakes." I studied him. Fresh uniform. Eager eyes. No ego yet. He wasn't asking for fame. He was asking for wisdom. Human stealth isn't about tricks, I told him. It's a culture. I wrote 3 words on the maintenance board that afternoon. Silence. Discipline. Respect. Then I added 3 subnotes. 1 clear voice. No clutter. Hold your line. Trust others to hold theirs. Read the sky like a musician reads notes. People started copying it down. Maybe they didn't understand yet, but they wanted to. That was enough. I didn't ask to lead. But soon I was staying late after briefings, sketching terrain shadows on spare transparencies, explaining how radar waves could bend over ridgelines, how cloud cover, wind layers, and ground inversion worked like a second skin if you knew how to wear them. Most of it went over their heads. At first. But something shifted. Noise in the comms grew quieter. Pilots began flying tighter. Their briefings became questions instead of bragging contests. Ruben called it a ripple. I've seen bases full of sound. Yours is the first where silence started meaning something. He wasn't wrong. That week, Captain Elms, who had laughed hardest during my first briefing, paused by the wall where I had pinned those 3 words. He studied them for a long time, then quietly tipped his cap. "Thanks," he said, "for not leaving us out there." I nodded. Didn't speak. We didn't need to. But there was still a debt I hadn't paid. In Ghost Halo, there was one rule. Protect the mission. Protect your wing. I did the first. Failed the second. My wingman's name was Dax. He had a voice like steel and a habit of cracking his knuckles twice before every launch. He never doubted me. Never flinched. He died trusting I had one more trick up my sleeve. And I didn't. So I buried Phantom 8 and took on routine assignments. Clean, predictable, safe. A shell of a pilot. No risks. No shadows. Until 15 red dots reappeared on a radar. And I had no choice but to remember. Colonel Marin called me in a week later. Head of Tactical Air Development. No nonsense. Sat behind a desk built like a tank. He'd read the mission report. Watch the radar replay. "You did something our analysts can't explain," he said. "How?" I said nothing. He leaned back. "Ghost Halo was shut down for a reason," I said finally. "The mental load. The strain. It chews people up. Makes them live 10 seconds ahead of the present. You stop sleeping. You stop breathing normally. You start anticipating instead of living." He nodded. "Then don't bring the program back," he said. "Teach parts of it. The discipline. The vision. Not the burden." I looked him in the eye. "I'll write the curriculum," I said. "But with one rule." "What's that?" "No mass training. No scaling. Selective. Quiet. Intentional." He didn't argue. Just opened a new file. "Welcome back, Phantom 8. The classroom didn't look like much. Just an old maintenance hangar with folding chairs, a projector that flickered, and a radar panel I reprogrammed to show distortion patterns instead of threat markers. That first group, 5 pilots, not chosen for their flight scores, chosen for something else. I reviewed their psychological profiles myself. I didn't want ego or hunger for glory. I wanted those who could listen, those who respected silence, and who had failed once without blaming someone else. Their names don't matter here. What matters is they sat with eyes wide open. I didn't start with flight drills. I started with a question. What is stealth? One said invisibility. Another said tech. A third said radar evasion. I shook my head. Stealth, I said, is the discipline of not being important until you have to be. That got their attention. We trained at night. No official logs. Just long flights through bad weather, unpredictable terrain, and airspace cluttered with friendly noise. I made them fly into blind zones and then find their way out without instruments. No warnings. No corrections. Just observation. They learned the feel of wind against their fuselage before pressure changed. Learned when to trust the sky to carry them and when to fall quiet until it passed. They mapped out signal pockets where radar twisted into blind corridors. They started seeing the air as I did, not as a barrier, but as a tool. But I warned them too. These methods aren't power plays, I said. They're escape hatches. Used wrong, and you endanger your entire flight. Each student logged a journal, not of maneuvers, but of moments. The second they felt the wind shift, the sound that meant a radar lock was close, how it felt when they flew unseen for the first time, and the weight of it. One night, after a long simulation over rough terrain, a pilot asked, "What was your moment?" I didn't hesitate. Ghost Halo 10, south of the Red Line Ridge. I could have broken silence to save one man. You didn't. I kept it. And 11 others lived. He didn't ask anything more. He didn't need to. The training cell remained off the books. No medals. No announcements. Just pilots who went back to their squadrons changed. More patient. More focused. More willing to hold the line without needing credit. Their success rates rose. Their near misses fell. And no one ever traced it back to a woman they used to laugh at in a briefing room. BlackRock changed. Not overnight. Not with fanfare. But the shift was undeniable. Pilots who once barked orders now whispered counts in rhythm. Radio traffic that used to be a blur of ego became focused, concise, clean. And the rookies? They didn't swagger anymore. They studied the wind charts before takeoff. They ran through terrain profiles before breakfast. They copied each other's notebooks instead of competing over kill counts. Even the base's whiteboard evolved. Where once crude sketches and call signs filled the space, someone now wrote, "Respect the silent profile." Underneath it, 3 underlined words in permanent marker. Silence. Discipline. Respect. No one erased it. No one dared. One evening, during post-flight cool-down, I stood on the tarmac as the same cargo drone we'd once shielded climbed into the dark, heavy with medical supplies. The new pilot on its deck had never met me, never heard of Ghost Halo. To him, I was just another officer checking jet temps and reviewing post-run telemetry. And that was fine. We don't always need statues. Sometimes the mission itself is monument enough. Ruben stood beside me, hands in his pockets as always. He looked at the streaks left by the drone's afterburn, then at the narrow white stripe he had just painted under my jet's nose. Not a kill mark. Not a victory stripe. Just a blink. A symbol that meant no shots fired. No lives lost. "Ain't often silence leaves a bigger mark than fire," he said. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Requests started coming in from other bases. Not for combat tactics, but for insight. What made 15 radar contacts vanish without counterfire? What technique rerouted a hostile ambush without revealing position? What kind of pilot drops off the grid and reappears behind the threat like a ghost? I sent nothing back at first. Then, just once, I answered with a photo. My cockpit. Night sky beyond the canopy. Clouds drifting like dark waves. The caption? "The sky doesn't like noise." That was all. Colonel Marin called it curriculum support. But what we were building was something else entirely. The idea spread, quietly. Not a program. A mindset. We didn't teach how to vanish. We taught why. Every lesson began with a reminder. These skills aren't for glory. They're for the moment nothing else works. The final card in a busted hand. I emphasized restraint again and again. You don't train to disappear, I told them. You train to know when not to be seen. The modules grew. We ran night exercises where pilots had to find each other without radar, comms, or visual flares, just air disturbance and instinct. We flew below skin ranges, along thermal curtains, inside valleys that bent echoes. Some students cried, not out of fear, but out of the pressure, the silence. The realization that this wasn't flying, it was feeling the sky breathe. One cadet froze mid-flight. "I can't do it," she said. "I can't fly blind." I talked her through it. One breath at a time. Rhythm instead of reason. Wind instead of HUD. She landed shaking. Then signed up for the next session. That's when I knew. This wasn't about stealth. It was about humility. Eventually, our graduates went back to their squadrons. No insignia marked them. No call sign change. Just a different look in their eyes. They still flew formation. Still pulled overwatch. Ran recon. Fought when they had to. But something had changed. They didn't just fly for their score. They flew for the team. For the silence between orders. For the moments that never make the reports but decide everything. Years later, mission logs across multiple wings showed strange trends. Higher survival, lower engagement frequency, better decision-making under duress. No one connected the dots. But I did. I stayed at Black Rock. Still flew routine sorties. Still walked the line at night, and touched the nose of my bird like it was a living thing. But now, I wasn't hiding. I was seeding. And the sky? It remembered. It wasn't about me anymore. The new instructors never called it stealth school. They called it weathercraft, or environmental integration, or just the whisper room. We didn't file reports. We filed rhythms. We taught checklists that began with the question, what does the sky want tonight? There were no simulations for that. Only instinct. I once told a class, you'll feel the difference the day you stop flying against the world and start flying with it. They thought it was poetry. Then it saved their lives over a canyon flight in a fog bank, and they stopped laughing. The base changed in other ways. Where once there were brawls over scoreboard tallies, now there were quiet conversations in hangars about inversion layers and ghost corridors. When I walked the halls, I no longer saw cocky flyers with too many medals and not enough awareness. I saw tuned professionals. Respectful, watchful, precise. We had created something rare, and we kept it that way. One night, a call came in from a squadron I didn't train. Caught in weather. One jet failing. Enemy signals circling close. They didn't ask for orders. Just a voice. So I took the radio and keyed the mic. This is Spectre 8, I said, using the name I hadn't spoken in years. The line went silent. Then someone replied. Copy. Listening. I guided them down using nothing but pressure cues and a map I'd memorized 12 years ago. No one saw us land. But we knew. Sometimes survival isn't loud. It's surgical, invisible, earned. The years rolled on. Pilots I'd trained moved on, deployed, promoted, some retired. A few never came back, but none of them ever got caught by the mistakes we used to make in those early days. They used what we taught, not always to disappear, but to avoid making noise that invites disaster. They stayed sharp, grounded, predictable only to each other. And I stayed at Black Rock. Still flew, still taught, but never posed for photos. Never accepted speaking gigs. I turned down every press request. When they asked for a group picture after a successful string of missions, I waved it off. Any day we all land safe, I said, is already a perfect picture. Late one night, I sat alone in the observation tower. The air was still, the runways empty. The sky above felt close, like velvet stretched tight. I pulled out the notebook. The first page still had the words I'd written when I left Ghost Halo behind. Never let the sky have to save lives from arrogance. Below it, I added, today, we made sure it didn't. I smiled, closed it. A memory drifted back, Dax's voice laughing over comms before our final mission. The sound of knuckles cracking. The silence that followed after I couldn't save him. I used to think silence was punishment. Now I know it's where the sky hides its deepest truths. Just before dawn, as I stepped back onto the flight line, one of the younger techs saw me. He didn't salute. Just nodded and said, they say you don't need to fly lead to lead the flight. I smiled at that. Only if the others are listening. When I finally stepped away from the cockpit, there was no ceremony. Just a quiet flight. Wheels down. Systems powered off. Helmet set on the bench one last time. I walked the runway alone, the hangars behind me humming with the next generation. In the sky above, a single cargo plane climbed, its lights steady against the dim violet of early dusk. I raised 2 fingers to my cap. A silent salute. It wasn't grief I felt. It was peace. The legacy didn't carry my name. It lived in the cadence of pilots checking wind layers before briefings. In the way a wing held formation tighter than required. In the breath a young flyer took before speaking, weighing silence first. I never asked them to remember me. I only asked that they remember the way. Not to vanish for glory, but to avoid the price of noise. Not to fly for praise, but to land with everyone intact. The training cell stayed small, selective, and quiet. The few who passed through it carried a different rhythm, a calmness that didn't fit the usual mold. Historians later noted a strange trend. Survival rates climbing in wings that never adopted new tech. Missions succeeding in storms that should have grounded everyone. They never traced it back. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Long after I left, the old hangar became a quiet study space. No plaque. Just a set of fading diagrams on the wall, and 3 words no one dared erase. Silence. Discipline. Respect. A new instructor found one of my old maps taped under a drawer, with a single line scribbled across the bottom. Stealth is ethics before technique. The strongest voice on frequency is the one that speaks last. I live away from the base now, near quiet hills, far enough from the cities that I can still hear the sky breathe. Sometimes, on clear nights, I see contrails tracing arcs overhead, tight, clean, perfect. And I smile. Not every jet can be invisible, but every pilot can choose the path that doesn't need to be seen to change everything. If this story resonated with you, remember, not every battle is won with fire. Some are won in silence. And the ones who never ask for applause, they're the ones worth following. Let me know if you'd like the entire story as a single file or formatted a specific way.